Good evening and welcome to In My Humble Opinion. I'm your host, Niceguy. My guest for this evening is Alex Heberling, creator of the Hues post-apocalyptic magical girls webcomic. Alex, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about the Hues.
Well, The Hues is a comic about rainbow-themed magical girls, and they fight an alien invasion in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio. And it's my attempt to sort of make a magical girl story that, is the kind of thing that inspired me when I was, 12, 13, 14, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully to make something with a little bit better representation than a lot of other series, TV shows, movies, etc. have.
Yeah, and I did want to talk about some of the representation because you have a very diverse cast. And one of the first things I picked up on, and I might be mistaken on one of the characters, but so one of the things I noticed in the four main characters is that you have basically all four major sexualities represented. You have a gay character, a bi character, an asexual character, and if I'm not mistaken, Lauren is straight.
As far as we know, yes.
As far, well, yeah, I guess no spoilers, no spoilers. But I thought that was. I mean, was that is that part of when you talk about representation? Was that part of what you had in mind?
Definitely different orientations is what I wanted to have among my characters. And so it's just sort of, my process of it is just sort of figuring out what works best for the character
Right,
herself and whatnot. Going from there. I'm not like doing a quota filling thing or anything. So
right,
it's
right,
not like, oh, I have to have one of each and, that kind of thing. But
right.
yeah, it is
Well, that's
something
kind
that's
of
on
cool
my
how it worked
mind.
out, though.
And
Especially with the representation of asexual characters. That's one that you normally would not normally find. The other thing I've noticed, I mean, there's a lot of racial diversity in the cast. The main character being of Indian descent. Is that right?
that's correct. Yes.
Yeah, and then also especially when you're talking about whether it's straight up magical girl or superhero trope, the body type of the characters involved is certainly not stereotypical, if you will. I mean,
Yeah.
it runs the gamut from character like Lauren, who's quite a bit on the heavier side, down to character like Hannah, who's a beanpole, basically. I mean, to the point that even
Yeah,
even her
pretty
head
much.
is skinny. So there's a wide range there. There's no power girl type character in that, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, you closest you probably get to Power Girl is Andy right now, and she's still kind of chubby and adorable.
Right, right, yeah, exactly. You've sort of got Sam, who's average, and Andy, who's like you say, yeah, kind of chubby but adorable, and then yeah, and then it runs a whole range.
Hmm.
Now, and this is you've been the Hughes got off to, as I was reading through the blog, it got off to kind of an inauspicious start in terms of where you were in your life at the time, and kind of how trying to get this off the ground. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it just kind of like right before I started the Hughes, I'd been working at a full-time job
Hmm.
for about 8 months, and then like a few days before I had the Hughes ready to launch and stuff like that, I got laid off from that job.
Right.
So that was a big old, like what the fuck going
Yeah,
on?
hell of a way to
Sorry
start.
if I
Yeah.
can't swear
No,
on the
no, no. You
show.
can. It's internet radio.
Um,
We're fine.
so that was a big old thing that happened and
Yeah.
was really sucky for a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I kind of like, as I like went on unemployment and stuff like that and was looking for jobs, I just kind of like hunkered down and worked on my comic and stuff like that while I had the extra time. And
Hmm.
then later on in the year, I hadn't found anything, and I was like, I really want to just do my comics. I've been doing this for at that point, I think it was, I just passed 8 years of doing comics online in one form
Yeah.
or another.
Yeah.
And so then I decided to try to make a go of it, with the full time art thing.
Right.
And so I ran my first Kickstarter then to fund a chapter of the comic, the third
Uh,
chapter of the
right. Now I
Hughes.
wanted to ask you about that Kickstarter because it sounded like there was some. I don't know if shenanigans is the right thing going on or something happened. What was the deal with that? What happened?
Definitely shenanigans occurred.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I want to do this
um,
as a warning for anyone else out there who's thinking of funding a project with Kickstarter, just as a kind of a word to the wise of what can happen. So what happened exactly?
like worst case scenario.
Okay.
I think it was really, really. really, really stressful. Now we have a word for it, which is kick trolling. But, back then we didn't really have a word for what happened. So what
Right.
happened
Yeah.
was that I got a pledge at some point during the campaign for like $1,000 from, somebody I didn't even know. And I was like, but, I went to their profile and I was like, is this for real? Is this like person, actually just goes around and gives people money? And like they had like, 40, 50 other projects on their profile. So I
So it
didn't
looked,
think anything of it. And
yeah,
I
it
was
looked
like,
like somebody who's
okay,
maybe just a patron of the arts or whatever, just
a
wanted
good
to,
Samaritan or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
made a habit of it.
So about 2 months after the Kickstarter ended, and I was working on the comic, and had the money, and I was shipping things and all this kind of stuff. I got a chargeback notification from Amazon, which was at the time the payment processor for Kickstarter,
Okay.
and it was for $1,000.
Oh, jeez.
And I knew who it was immediately because that was the only charge for $1,000 that had
Right.
occurred during that Kickstarter. So I immediately freaked out for like 4 days, and I, sent appeals to Amazon and emailed Kickstarter about it and stuff like that. And maybe a few weeks after that, I got a note on Kickstarter from another project creator that this person had also pledged to and also canceled the pledge later on.
And you'd already spent some of this money at that point. If you're shipping books and whatnot, you don't still have this cash in hand.
Right. And that Kickstarter specifically was to cover like my rent and bills while I worked on this chapter for, 2 or 3 months or whatever.
Wow.
Like that was part of the deal.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like that's like a quarter of what I made.
Yeah.
Potentially that I had to give back and have nothing left.
Yeah.
And so this person who had messaged me about the scammer had also talked to all of the other creators of the other projects that were on their profile. And they'd collected all sorts of other stories and comments. And like, this person pledged $5,000 to me. And now I can't make this thing that I wanted to make, and all sorts of horror stories like that. And so then I proceeded to burn down Twitter in my rage.
Right.
And I
read about that in the blog.
Yeah. And so then, I posted all over Twitter and Tumblr about it, and then got some attention on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kickstarter and Amazon, posted about it. And then about 2 weeks or so after that whole kerfluffle, then I got an email from Amazon saying that they weren't going to make me give them $1,000 back. So
I mean, and actually, I'm sure that was probably the longest 2 weeks of your life. But I'm almost impressed that it was resolved that quickly.
Yeah. I mean, the whole process from getting the chargeback to getting the email from Amazon that they wouldn't take money was probably more like a month or 6 weeks or something like that.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
So it was a little more spread out than that. But yeah that month sucked.
Yeah, I can imagine. God. And I'm trying to, as I was reading it, and I did want to get a little more information about that and also put it out there for other people. I'm trying to think from the point of view of contract law. I'm like, who's really liable here? And yeah, they kind of had it set up that it was really nobody's problem. If they didn't want it to be,
kind of.
They could have had you tied up forever, but I guess they didn't want the bad press. I mean, that would have killed Kickstarter for sure. Wow.
And now the Kickstarter's integrity team kind of formed, I think, out of that, or at least around that time.
Yeah.
When there were a couple other like kick trolling problems, like backers backing a significant amount to a project and then canceling 2 days later, and that looks really bad on a project's little graph on their tracker and stuff like that. So
right.
That kind of thing is now on Kickstarter's radar, and as far as I know, they're handling stuff like that much more quickly and resolving those kind of things. There's a project going on right now called the Feminist Deck, which is being run by a friend of mine, and she got targeted by some 8chan like Gamergate trollers.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
One of them pledged like $10,000 to it one morning, and she was like, "What is going on? Oh God, what's happening?" And Kickstarter, followed up with that and banned the guy and stuff like that. So
unbelievable.
The good part about that is that her project got a lot more attention from starting to get trolled by Gamergate people. So it's gotten all the more eyes on it. So I think she's gonna be fine.
Right. Yeah. And have you used Kickstarter for since then, or
Yes, I have. I
okay.
did my a run for my first book collection earlier this year.
And that's out now, right? Those books.
Those books are crossing the Pacific right now.
Ah, okay, okay.
I
Yeah,
should have them by the end of next month.
and there's an ad, and there's a video essentially showing some of the proofs on. And actually, we should mention the website because I haven't done that yet. It's thehues.alexheberling.com. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And if
Okay.
that's too complicated to spell because, my last name's German, then you could go to the-hues.com and it'll send you to the same place.
Oh, okay, okay. And you'd mentioned also that you had been at the time that this was all coming about, that you'd been putting out comics online for, you said, about 8 years at that point. And I want it was because I'd also read is it Garanos or Garanos?
Garanos, yeah.
Garanos. I'd also read that recently as well, and that was from a while back, as I recall. That ended like in I want to say 2010. Was that? Does that sound
That
about right?
that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay, and that was and I guess and guys, this is it's everyone who's listening. Both of these are fantastic stories. One of the things about Garanos is that it actually is finite. It has a beginning, it has a build up, and it has a resolution. It's not meant as a what. So some webcomics just sort of go on forever and then just disappear. This actually is a self contained story. Can you tell us a little bit about Garanos and what's that all?
Yeah, Gyarados is a sort of a gothic fantasy sort of story about a woman who gets possessed by a demon while she's on a journey to rescue her fiance who's kidnapped.
Right, and it's sort of an inversion of the damsel in distress in this case because it was the prince that was kidnapped and the princess essentially who was off to rescue him.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So I'm sensing you have a lot of strong women in your comics. That's no, there's no
Yup,
feminist theme
yup.
here at all going on, right?
Shh, it's a dirty word. No, no, no.
Now, yeah,
You'll bring down the trolls and fedoras.
well, we've already mentioned 4chan, so I mean, I think you really.
Yeah,
I hope nobody's
true.
listening. So now what? And you had a couple other works that were on there. So yes, so from the site from the Hues, there's a link at the top to alexheberling.com. And one of the interesting ones, and unfortunately, you only got a couple points into it, was Corner on Main, which was I guess it was intended to be a series of unrelated but intersecting stories, and it
Yeah, that
didn't.
was a comic that I did during one of my independent studies during my last like 2 years of college.
Okay,
It was kind of, Clerks-ish
I
inspired and
got I
stuff
got
like
a
that.
lot of I got a big Clerks feeling off of it. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. It was
yeah,
kind of like a more like cynical and situational comedy sort of thing. And
right,
I was interested at the time in nonlinear storytelling and stuff like
yeah,
that. So this is
yeah.
kind of my experiment with that. And at some point, I'd like to go back to it and add some more stories
I would.
to the universe.
I think that would be cool because I was going to ask you if you plan to do more, and I just figured it was so long ago that probably not, but it would be cool to see because yeah, it was interesting. You sort of see the different perspectives and the way they kind of overlap like that, and
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those someday maybe things. And originally, something that I couldn't duplicate when I put Corner on Main on my main website was that back when I made the comic for my art classes, I set them up so that you were in one story track and there was another character in the background,
uh-huh.
like between the two girls and then the checkout guy Daryl.
Right.
Like if there was, one of the girls in the background on a Daryl page, you could click over to that point in the girls' story
Oh, right,
and
right.
vice versa. So it was kind of going to be this whole interconnected thing where you could kind of like eavesdrop on one and go back to another and that kind of thing as well.
Now
It was very art school.
well, it was really cool. It was a really cool concept. It's not something you see. I mean, it's not the first time anyone's done it, but you don't see it in webcomics a lot. That's for sure.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was now one thing I'm kind of getting out of a little bit out of order here. One thing I noticed between Garanos and the Hues is it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like the tools that you were using had evolved somewhat or had changed. What how exactly? Because when you're drawing the Hues, I'm assuming you're basically working on a tablet and whatnot. Was that the same with Garanos?
Yeah, pretty much. The only part of Garanos's production that was different is that I used to draw the pages out on copy paper, just the sort of sketch phase
Oh,
and stuff
okay.
like that, and then I would scan it into Photoshop and then draw all the panel borders and do everything else digitally. But
Oh, okay.
the
Okay.
first initial sketches were done on pencil and paper,
Oh,
whereas the
okay.
Hues has been all digital from the very
Gotcha.
beginning.
Gotcha. And I guess getting back to the Hues and the whole magical girl genre. That's I mean are you taking that from taking any inspiration there from anime or?
Oh yes, definitely.
So what are some of the influences there?
Absolutely Sailor Moon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Of course.
Probably with a side of Power Rangers, to be honest, because I love Power Rangers when it was on the Fox, afternoon TV show block. And
That must be a
then Sailor
generational thing
Moon.
because that's one I never got. I'm a huge fan of anime and Japanese pop culture, but that's one I never got into.
Yeah, Power Rangers just like hit me. I was like the exact like target age when that started airing on American TV. So
Yeah. Okay.
I caught me hook, line, and sinker. And so color coded superheroes with magic powers are like my bread and butter.
Right. Now I can skip this section if the answer is no spoilers, but I was a little bit curious about Sam's power because of course Lauren is pretty easy to figure out. Well, lightning, electricity. Hannah, of
Hmm.
course, fire. There's some mental influence with Andy. But what is the deal with the light that Sam's doing, or is that not to be revealed yet?
Yeah, that's in spoiler territory,
Oh,
so we'll get there. We'll get there at some point.
all right. Well, yeah, and definitely check it out, guys, because it is a cool story. So now you've got the books are coming over. There is a donate page and a Patreon page that is connected to the main site. Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you about the big comics shows. The one you advertised recently for Pinkerton Library.
The Pickerington Library one I did was it was fun. It was a nice day at the library. It was kind of like a comic study hall almost. There wasn't a whole lot of people there simply because I think it was probably such a nice day that people weren't going to hang out in the library all day. They were out enjoying the sunshine.
Oh, okay.
But got to hang out with some friends that pretty much only see at shows because we're all
Right.
busy.
And I see you do you do hit up the conventions quite a bit. It looks like.
Yes, there's
Yeah.
Ohio is like riddled with conventions, so it's nice that I don't have to go too far most of the time.
You ever get up into the Detroit area?
Yeah, I've done YomaCon for a few years. Last year I did DecCon, which was the North American Sci-Fi Con,
Uh huh.
and I'm not sure if I'm getting up there this year, but yeah, I go to Detroit from time to time. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to keep an eye out for that then. That's my neck of the woods. Well, Alex, appreciate you coming on, and definitely, guys, check out the Hues, the-Hues.com or the Hues.alexheberling.com. Definitely click on the donates, click on the Patreons, look for the books, and yeah, thanks for coming on, Alex. It's some great stuff you got going on there.
Oh, thank you so much.
Many thanks to Alex for coming on the program. There's a bit of a change of plans regarding the rest of the show. As a special segment tonight, I'm pleased to be joined by the creators of the My Vanity Fair cover phenomenon that is currently taking over Tumblr and Twitter, Crystal Frasier and Jenn Dolari. Jenn, Crystal, welcome to the program.
Hi, nice to be here.
Howdy. So, I mean, where did this all start? What was the inspiration here?
Well, the beginning of this whole very long, strange trip has been, of course, the Caitlyn Jenner Vanity Fair cover.
Right.
She came out, burst out onto the scene, and it's an amazing photo shoot, it's an amazing cover, but it was the same story that I've been seeing just way too often.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a legitimate story. It's the story of, the older, middle-aged, white, transgender person transitioning with all the resources that they need.
Right.
And it's not exactly what the transgender story for most people is. It's still a legitimate story. There are people, and Jenner being one of those people, is transitioning late in life.
Right.
And it just happens to be her story.
Yeah.
But it's not my story. And it's not Chris's story. And it's not people's story. And I started thinking, where's and I kind of regret saying, where's my Vanity Fair cover? Because it kind of sounds a little bit catty, and it does sound a little bit narcissistic.
Right.
I really meant my as in the collective my as in our, which is what I should have used.
Right.
But it's still a valid point. Where's our Vanity Fair cover? And then Crystal and I were out walking the dog, and we started talking about it. And Crystal began thinking, and I began thinking, why don't we make our own Vanity Fair covers? And then Crystal took it from there.
Yeah, I'm a part-time graphic designer, and so I made up a quick little mock-up of the Vanity Fair cover in the same style as the one for Caitlin, and slapped my picture on it and sent the transparent template over to Jen and our friend Miranda, and we all put them up on Tumblr, kind of expecting, a couple of dozen people would think it was neat and contribute. And it kind of took off.
Yeah, it is.
It
is completely caught fire. I mean, I'm just shocked in seeing, because I've hardly got the scoop here. I realize because this has been picked up by BuzzFeed, E! Online, Huffington Post. I saw New York Daily News, New York Post, The Telegraph. I mean, how does that?
Telegraph?
Yeah, we were in The Telegraph
and E! Online.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, how, obviously that you just said that was not, that's way beyond what your expectations were. But I mean, how do you feel about that right now?
I'm trying not to focus on how many people are looking at like a little quick selfie.
You guys are gonna have the two most famous selfies in the world very shortly.
Yes, it's getting there.
One of the things is that we didn't expect this to happen. We expected, Crystal would have a picture, I'd have a picture, Miranda would have a picture. We'd get maybe 5 or 6, maybe 10, 20 other people to do it.
I was honestly thinking 30 to 50 other people.
We didn't expect this not only to not go viral, we didn't expect it to go nuclear.
Right,
and we're actually very happy with it. The way that I'm looking at it is I just try not to think about it. I'm just like, you know what? Let's just keep moving forward. Let's keep doing what we're doing. We'll deal with the aftermath later. Just once we're at the end of the tunnel, then we'll see how far we've come and decide what we need to do next, or if there is anything to do next, or if there's anything that we need to clean up after.
Well, yeah, and it's great because it's just the issue of visibility, because it's something that for so long has really, whether intentionally or otherwise, has been hidden, has been sort of in the background, and so many individuals are coming forward and being part of this now, and that's something that's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see so many different faces and so many different stories attached to this hashtag.
So one thing I'm wondering is, do you have any plans to take this one step further and actually include some of the stories that might go with some of these pictures?
Well, we'd certainly like to. We've got a Tumblr to aggregate all these at the moment, which is My Vanity Fair Tumblr, or myvanityfaircover.tumblr.com. And everything we reblog there comes with the text of whoever submits it or whoever we reblog it from.
Okay.
We're working on an aggregator website for all of these so we can gather everything from Tumblr and from Twitter. We are dealing with some technological hurdles because neither of us were really prepared for this to take off like it did, and neither of us is super tech savvy.
And on top of that, we're discussing plans as to what we'll do when things cool down a little bit. Right now, we're just too busy. We're too busy just running the show right now.
At 78-hour days at work.
I absolutely love my job, but it is 8 hours away from being able to do all this.
Absolutely.
We do have plans for, we're not plans. We have some ideas of what we want to do once this cools down a little bit, and that may be part of it.
And you mentioned some concerns about privacy and sensitivity surrounding some of the people's stories, depending on how much they actually want to become part of something.
We want to make sure people have the opportunity to opt out, because when people started contributing to this, it was not an international news story.
Right,
so if people are nervous or uneasy, we want them to totally be okay, sending us a message and asking us to remove their image, because it can be really hard to get a job or just find housing if you're visibly trans. And
So there's no opportunity to go stealth after your pictures become part of something like this.
No, I am never going to be able to go stealth.
Yeah, my picture's out there 16,000 times in who knows how many countries. But on top of that, one of the things that makes me really proud is that I'm seeing some of the stories of no one knows I'm out, let's do this. And are using it as their way to come out, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's
awesome. But at the
awesome.
same time, there's also going to be that person who's going to say, I didn't expect this to happen, and I'm not happy with it.
Right.
We want to try, we can't take it off Tumblr. We can take it off of our Tumblrs, but we can't take it off of every Tumblr out there. That's reposting it. But we can at least do our part to say, hey, we're cool with that. We want to make sure that the person is respected before we start throwing stories out there.
Right.
We're hoping to make sure people want to be famous before we make them famous.
Oh, that's a very good policy.
Yeah, well, I wish we'd thought about that.
Like, you know what? I'll bet 30 people like this. 30. Oh God. I have seen my face on so many fucking websites in the last week.
I gotta admire that. Admire you guys on that part. I mean, I know that there's a whole stereotype about the whole the word brave as applied to this, but just from a civilian standpoint, I don't know that I would want my face put out. I gotta tell you, before I took the show, before I started putting videos on my own blog, you know, I'm just like, I don't know, you know, I don't even know if I want someone who I know personally listening in. It's just like, yeah, the cat's out of the bag on that one. The genie's out of the bottle for you guys. That had to be a bit of a shock at first.
One of the funniest things that happened was I'm sitting at work and you know I'm keeping tabs on the Tumblr. I can't actually work on the Tumblr at work, but I'm actually keeping tabs on it and on Facebook and on Twitter and all the social media. And someone pokes me and says, "Hey, you're on Yahoo News," and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, the hashtag is on Yahoo News. That's great, wonderful."
Nope.
So I go over to Yahoo News and look at it. Sure enough, there's a picture of Caitlyn Jenner and a picture of me side by side.
Only their mother can tell them apart.
Only their mother. No, I can tell me apart from very, very far apart from Caitlyn Jenner.
Right. You're the Mexican one.
I'm the Mexican one. She's the not. But on top of that, I'm like, you know, okay, that's cool. The hashtag is on Yahoo. That's great, wonderful. Oh, my parents use Yahoo for email. They're going to see this.
Right.
Have I called them since this has started? I should probably call them before they see that.
Right.
That's exactly when your mother called to yell.
Well, no, she didn't yell. She hasn't called, and I really still need to talk to her, which I think I'm going to do after this. Now that I think about it.
Well, and Jen, I thought it was so cool because you wrote me a couple weeks back just saying that I think it was one of your cousins had stumbled across the interview we did, and we did that a while ago. That's going on, if that might be a year ago or something like that.
It's about a year.
Yeah, and he stumbled across it and was just and had some really nice things to say, and I was all geeked about that. I was like, oh, hey, look, somebody read my stuff, and now I'm like, oh my God, that's nothing.
Yeah, you know, I've been out to my family for almost about 2-3 years now. There's a long story behind that as well.
Yeah, because it was a good
whole other show.
Yeah.
But I was not out to my family. I was out to the rest of the world, but not to my family for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
And I finally came out to my cousins. They were cool with it. But at the same time, I hadn't talked to them for about 15 years. So they were like, hey, that's great. Glad you're back in the family. I'm going to get on with my life. So there was, you know, not really a lot of, you know, they were happy to see me back. They wanted me back there. It was glad to have them back. But you've been gone for so long that we've moved on a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of my cousins just was like, I Googled your name on the Googles. Of course, that's where you do your Googling mostly. Mostly. Sometimes you Google on Yahoo, but mostly you Google on Google. And I found this interview with you, and I just want to say I'm very proud to be your cousin, and you were one of the most interesting people in our family. And I was like, oh.
that was really cool.
I was away for so long. I'm sorry about that. You know, a lot of people, I get a lot of things about narcissism where people are like, you're just so big about yourself. I'm really not.
Well, and I know, and see, I know you well enough to know that, and that's why I was surprised. Because I think when we first did the interview, you were actually nervous about the fact that I might have done it as a video as opposed to something on text, and
exactly.
very, very concerned about, do I really want to put myself out there, and do I want people to see me? Do I want people to hear me? And that ship has sailed.
I have a lot of confidence, but I think that comes across as narcissism sometimes.
Right.
And I'm really not. I'm actually, you know, when someone praises me, I'm just like, oh, that's one. Thank you. I appreciate it. And that took a long time for me before I was just like, oh, no, not me. No. It took a lot of confidence before I could say, thank you.
Right. Well, and you mentioned, because we were listening to the previous interview before we started this one, you mentioned about kind of keeping the blinders on and moving forward. And I mean, there's nobody who's going to stay more grounded than you in all of this, Jen. I think I can say that pretty confidently. So
I appreciate that.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
I appreciate that. I do what I can, because if I look around and see what we've done, I start to go, oh no.
Grow up.
Just eyes ahead, one step. Actually, one of the things in my life, you won't know it from the picture because I sure don't look it anymore. I used to do a lot of bike riding. And in the Texas Hill Country, there are, of course, hills. So
You don't
one of the
say.
things, that's what they call it, the Texas Hill Country. And if I ever came to a hill and I looked at it, I would immediately think, no, I can't go up that hill.
Right.
But what I would do was I would look at my feet and just say, just keep cranking. Don't worry about how high up you are on that hill, how far up you. Just keep cranking the pedals and just keep moving, because eventually you'll go up there.
Right.
And that's kind of how I treat this. Is if I look around, I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I just keep focusing, I'm like, okay, do X, do Y, do Z, just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
That sudden looking around and realizing, you're 500 feet up in the air on a tightrope between two buildings and you're about to fall down. That doesn't happen if you just look at your feet and keep walking on the tightrope.
Now, aside from the pictures, I'm curious about the feedback you guys have gotten. I mean, we know there's been a lot of positive feedback. Has there been any blowback? Has there been any negative response yet?
There's been a little bit of negative response, but that's to be expected.
Right.
I mean,
anytime a woman is on the internet, she will get some negative response.
Yeah. But my attitude has always been, there's going to be people who just don't like what we're doing.
Sure.
That's fine. They can deal with that. That's their opinion. They don't have to look at the pictures. There's going to be people who go out and attack what they don't like. And you know what? I don't care about that. I've had a few little attacks here and there, and you know what? I don't care what they think, because, I mean, obviously I'm not going to change their minds. I'm not going to be able to influence their opinion. They're pretty much going to be set the way they are. Let's change the minds that are willing to be changed. Let's educate the people who are willing to learn. There are certain people who may be closed-minded but just don't have enough information. Let's work with them a little bit. Let's move forward, because if we focus on the ant bites, we're going to miss the big picture here.
Right.
And ultimately, we have gotten some really good feedback in the form of criticism. We got some notes that we weren't very non-binary inclusive and weren't really inclusive towards trans men. Not necessarily because we ever said you can't participate, but because originally we made this campaign sort of addressing the misogyny in the media that wants to focus on a narrow, very attractive subset of the community.
And to be fair, that's also too tight of a focus beam, and we decided we need to widen that out a little bit. And we decided trans men could come on too. I mean, as soon as we saw the first couple, we're like, yeah, you know what, join the party.
Please.
Right, because it's all about everybody. I mean, it's about the whole,
Yeah, and even the non-binary folk, we offered, we want them in on this as well. We kind of got a little bit of blowback from that because people were saying we weren't doing it enough, but I'll be honest, we just weren't finding them. If you point them to us, we will be happy to add them.
Right.
Oh God, yeah.
Right, and that's a good point. So where how do, aside from putting it on their own Twitters or their own Tumblrs, is there people are sending you these, or how will they participate in this?
We're kind of playing this by ear.
Okay.
Yeah, we did not expect this to take off. We were unprepared for international superstardom.
So the way that we're kind of doing this right now is that if you're using the hashtag, it makes it a great place for us to just run down the entire list and say, okay, that's a picture, that's a picture, that's a picture.
Right.
We do have a method to make sure that the pictures are genuine. I am worried about, people who are just trying to out other people, or people who are just trying to get.
Yeah, wow.
Show up at least once.
Yeah,
but we have a method for that.
There was a cover featuring Governor Chris Christie going around this morning trying to make fun of him, and that was just
Was that the one in the baseball uniform?
Yeah.
That left a bad. I mean, not that I really give a damn about Chris Christie, but that really left a bad taste in my mouth. I think people were jumping on that and just, There's
a specific message we're doing with this, and if you want to have your own message, you're not going to. We don't want you to apply it to ours. We're busy with what we've got. Make your own Vanity Fair tag. Do that.
Well, and I did wonder about the appropriation, either by somebody with just a smart ass sense of humor, or sort of the I don't know, like a cishet equivalent of the not all white people or not all men kind of a phenomenon, where or something along that nature. I don't know.
We haven't really run into that for the most part.
Ah, shit! I just gave somebody the idea then.
Now, probably as we're speaking.
But my attitude towards that is, if we're not doing it, there's something for you to do.
Right.
We're doing our thing for what we need to do. If you feel that you're being slighted by something, by society or anything, go out and do something about it. Make your own hashtags, which is apparently the new form of activism these days. That's how I've always seen it. Is I've been trans since I've been trans all my life.
It's about 1970.
Yeah, I've been trans since about 1974. But
right.
But I've always seen that I need to make my life better and if I can make other people's lives better, great, let's do this.
Yeah.
If someone feels that way, I'm okay with them doing what they need to do to make their lives and the people that they feel they're going to help better.
Right.
And, you know, if I'm on board with that, more power to it. But we're doing something for this specific reason. And if you want to try to appropriate that, I'm not too happy about that. But by all means, do your own thing. You know,
Right.
I'm happy to see you do your own thing, and I'll help you if it's something that I believe and agree in.
Right. Right. This is Niceguy Eddie. You're listening to In My Humble Opinion on Rainbow Radio. We're going to go back and rejoin Jenn and Crystal.
Question number 1. Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
Well, I wouldn't say it was a party.
Have you ever been a member of the Communist Brunch?
It was more of a social gathering.
Social gathering?
I mean, Lenny had a muffin, but I don't think that really counts as a full brunch.
Did it have red frosting?
No, it's a muffin.
I don't believe it.
And that, of course, was the answer to, so where do you guys fall politically? I just have to do some creative editing, and you know, I can get you guys blackballed by Hollywood. Okay.
Yeah, like you'd be the first.
I can do better than that. I'm a Texas secessionist. I mean, come on.
Oh, well, that's something. Actually, that was something I did want to touch on for just in all seriousness with politics, because one of the and I know this isn't about Jenner, but I did want to get your guys' take on one aspect of it, because there's been I've kind of touched upon this with several guests now. That I found basically fell into 4 categories. There was a lot of support, of course, and I think the reaction to what you guys are doing is reflective of that, because it's not critical of Jenner. I think it is in support of the trans community in general, but Jenner at the moment is kind of obviously a significant part of that at the moment. There's been hate, which sadly is to be expected in the world we live in. There was the argument, and I think this is, and it's not necessarily a criticism, and I assume this is part of what's driving what you guys do, that maybe Jenner is not the best representative for this story, because it doesn't parallel, like you say, so many other people's stories. The other camp, and this is where I kind of fell into, was during that whole interview. The thing that got me hung up was the whole that she came out as a conservative Christian Republican, and obviously there's a wide range if you take any one of those words individually, but when you put all 3 of them together, I was struck by that, largely because she's supporting a political movement that was very on the hostile side on most, I would say, all trans issues, LGBT issues in general, trans issues in particular, of late. Is there and I know, Jenn, you've said that as a Texas Democrat, you're considered, how did the saying go?
The term is I'm a left-wing liberal in Texas, and in Washington State, I'm a left-leaning conservative, and in Canada, I'm a fascist.
Right, exactly. So it's somebody with a particularly unique viewpoint there. Do you think that's significant, or is there? I don't know. Is that camp overreacting? What do you think about that?
I don't agree with Caitlin's politics personally, but between the interview and how she's handled coming out since Monday, she has been incredibly magnanimous and incredibly graceful and wonderful about explaining that her situation and her experiences are very atypical, and drawing a lot of attention to the rest of the trans community, which is really wonderful, and part of kind of gave us the idea to do this hashtag in the first place.
Yeah.
So I don't want to rake her over the coals for having a different political leaning that I may not disagree with.
Right. Well, no, that's my job, so that's okay.
Fair enough.
Right. Okay.
I mentioned several times with an interview that we had was coming from Texas, which is an incredibly conservative state.
Right.
But the people are so incredibly friendly there that I have no problem talking with people in the Hill Country in Texas that are Republican, because they are good people despite their whatever their politics are.
Yeah, and there's certainly no shortage of being a liberal or being a Democrat doesn't make you immune to transphobia either, or homophobia either. So
that's true. I've met some aggressively homophobic liberals.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think it's about the label necessarily. It just struck me. Yeah, it was one of those things that it was 30 seconds of an hour, 2 hour interview, and I was like, I just couldn't get those 30 seconds out of my head. I was like, So
it does seem like she's working against her own interests, but
precisely.
At the same time, I've seen a lot of trans women and a lot of gay men and lesbians feel like they can change the right-wing political movements from within. And I respect their efforts.
In the end, it's
Yeah.
her decision to decide what side of the political spectrum she's on. It's not my place to say anything. And if she's just a good person, I'm actually okay with it.
Right, sure. Oh, and hey, I mean, she managed to get Rick Santorum to act, marginally respectful for about 30 seconds. So that's something right there. I mean,
wait, there's a politician named Santorum? Does he know what that means?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have no comment on that on this recorded call.
Well, all in all, it's just it's phenomenal how this is worked out. Now, shifting gears a bit to a different project, Jenn, while I have you on, would it be okay if we talk comics for a bit? Because I'm good either way.
I'm totally okay with talking comics. Crystal will probably stay out of this one, but I'll go ahead and take it.
Yeah, I mostly read comics.
Well, are you a fan of Closetspace?
Yes, that's actually how Jenn and I met.
Oh, then definitely stay on. Definitely stay on.
Hey, I'm gonna have a fawning fan talk about me on the radio.
You're so cool, Jenn.
Oh, I know.
When are we gonna get an update?
Oh, hold on. Hold that thought. Okay, so something else I wanted to touch on, Jenn. Well, I got you on the air, and that's the other work that you're doing. That's Closetspace and A Wish for Wings.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a bit about those.
I've been drawing comics since about 1987, just on pieces of paper, pieces of math homework because I couldn't do the math part of the homework. I picked up a couple of techniques here and there, and right about the year 2000, or actually 97, well, let's even go back farther, 94, I came up with this idea of Closetspace.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about two trans women that lived together in the same house that didn't know that each other were trans. And at the time, I was drawing, but not very well. I considered myself more of a writer who draws versus an artist who writes.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got this planned as a TV series to do. I actually wrote out a whole 26 episode season because I didn't figure any networks were actually going to get me past one season once they figured out what the heck I was going to do with the story.
Are you listening, NBC? Are you listening, CBS?
Yeah, apparently we have the in with ABC.
ABC, are you listening, ABC? This is good stuff. I've been reading it for a couple years now. It's good stuff.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. So about 97, I came up with a series. I tried to get it shopped around, learned how the Hollywood sausage machine worked, and decided I didn't want to do that. So,
was that intentional, the sausage machine?
That's actually a term that they use, I've heard. The people behind the scenes call it the Hollywood sausage machine because you get to see how the shows are made, and it's very, very unglamorous.
So it's not because of all the...
It's not because of the pork they use. No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Nor is that a reference to the casting couch in a disturbing way.
I wasn't referencing that at all. Someone else.
Of course not.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I tried to shop it around as a television series. Didn't really work, so I decided to try and make a comic out of it. And I still didn't think my comic chops were very good, so I rewrote it as a comic strip that a friend of mine was going to draw by the name of Dove Sherman, who actually designed quite a few of the characters that I'm using now. And we tried getting that done that way. We turned out that it was just going to be too much work. I decided to try it as a webcomic, running weekly. And mind you, this is like 1997 when WebSpace, at the most you got maybe a meg.
Right.
2 meg.
Yeah, there was nothing like that at the time.
Yeah, there was nothing like that. So I tried to do it, didn't have enough room for it, figured, it's not going to happen. And a company, or I think it was a company called KeenSpace. I don't know if they're a company or just an organization or what, but KeenSpace was a big webcomics mecca, I guess you could call it, a nexus.
Yeah.
And they were offering free space to anyone who would draw a comic. And I figured, what the heck? Let's go ahead and do this.
Yeah.
So I started drawing this comic called A Wish for Wings, which is not the Closetspace one because I figured, hey, if I fail, I don't want my best property out there. So I drew this story about A Wish for Wings, which is about a girl who wants to be an angel. And the story came to me, the way I like to say it is that I had an angel night. I was working not working. We can edit that out too.
Okay.
We were, let me try. Wow. I haven't talked about this in a while. I've been so much on the Vanity Fair tag.
Stick to the script, Jen.
I'm working on it.
And the funny thing is, you think I'm going to edit this.
I was a member of an old cartoon fantasy organization. I went back for one meeting where they would show a lot of old anime. And one of the things that they showed was this anime called I Want to Be an Angel, which was about a woman who wanted to be an angel but wasn't, if I remember right. I'm sure someone will correct me on that very loudly and vociferously if I got it wrong. They then showed another one called Risky Safety. It was Magical Theater Risky Safety, which was about an angel in training and a demon in training, which was an adorably cute story. I went home that night, and my mom was making some dolls for a cousin's quinceañera. We're a Mexican family, and we do the 15-year debut kind of thing.
Right.
And the theme was angels. So I had like 250 angels staring down at me. So
it's kind of a message there, right? Kind of a sign.
A message there.
Yeah.
So I went to sleep that night, woke up the next morning with just this story germ of an idea of a girl who wanted to be an angel, but really wasn't. She just thought she was. And what would happen if someone who thought she was an angel actually met angels? So the story kind of blew up, and within about 2 weeks, I went from story idea to first comic in about 2 weeks. And so that's how A Wish for Wings started. My computer broke down about 6 months later. I figured, well, A Wish for Wings not going to work. Let's just scrap it. Right. Got a new computer and figured, well, let's do this again, but we'll do it with Closetspace this time. And then I figured at the time I had a lot of free time and figured I could do 2 comics in a row.
Right.
So I brought back the A Wish for Wings one.
Yeah, A Wish for Wings is still going on. So yeah.
Yeah, it's been almost 14 years now.
Wow.
14 years of comics, or 14 years of working on comics, but only about 7 years of actual.
Which maybe brings back the question that Crystal had earlier. When's that going to be updated, huh?
Well, we're waiting on a computer right now.
Oh, okay.
I had a couple of months ago. I was laid off, and I actually sat down and I drew a comic once every 3 days, and I live streamed it on top of that.
I was in I tuned in a couple of live streams.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. The problem after that was it didn't bring in much money, and so I had to leave the apartment. So I haven't done too many updates since because I just don't have an optimal artist space.
Right.
Now that I'm up here in Washington, I'm back in an artist kind of area. I don't have really all the tools I need to do the comics, which are sitting in Texas right now.
Ah, okay.
I don't also have the time because I've got an 8-hour job that's 40 hours a week, and sometimes just leaves me too exhausted to draw.
I can relate to that.
Now that I'm actually sitting down and about to do it, I have a computer that goes completely kablooey, so I'm not able to sit down and draw. That should be fixed shortly, so we're probably going to have an update before the end of the month because I have a Patreon account, which is at patreon.com/Dolari, and I get paid for my comics, and I haven't been paid in a very long time.
You did it on a per comic basis instead of on a per month basis, see?
Yeah. I thought I could actually be productive. Dangle the carrot in front of Jen. Let's see if she goes for it. No, she's lying down and going.
You know, I knew we shouldn't have used carrots.
It's chocolate that works.
Of course. And Crystal, before we started this segment, you mentioned that this was actually you're a big fan of Closetspace. This was actually how you and Jen met.
Oh yeah, we met when I went to a convention in South Carolina was it 2004? 2004 to see her.
There was a convention called TriNotCon in the area, and they invited a whole bunch of the transgender comic artists, not just me, but a whole bunch of others. And my mom worked for a major airline, and so I had free flights everywhere.
Okay.
So I figured, what the heck? Let's go ahead and do this. And I flew off to North Carolina, had a great time the first year, and we met across the table, and we just took it off from there.
Completely platonically.
Because
that pregnant pause there made it sound like.
Yeah, there's nothing extra going on there because if there was, her wife would kill.
Fair enough. So now, and we've spoken about this before, Jen, on IMHO on the blog in the previous interview, because for those listening, we've been over some of this stuff before. But now Closetspace now though, the story's evolved a bit from what it was originally. So tell us a little bit about where it's going now and some of the issues that you cover with that.
Well, one of the original story of Closetspace, the original television series that I was working on, it kind of had this. I had this idea in my head of let's explore the transgender spectrum.
Right.
And we have several characters in Closetspace. There's Carrie, who is a transgender woman who wants to live as a woman. We have Allison, who in the current storyline is a transgender woman who had the surgery and regretted it. Right. There's a story behind that. We had Victoria, who was just a drag queen, and Heidi, who is a dominatrix who hates her job, which I thought was just hilarious. But those characters, when I originally created them, were actually archetypes. Okay. And you'll have to excuse the terminology I'll use because it was effective in 1995 when we came up with the idea for the story. Right. And it's kind of outdated now. And I don't know, some people may actually take offense to it. I don't mean offense at all. It's just how we thought back then.
You're going to get letters?
I'm going to get so many letters. What really was going to be was that Carrie was going to be the transgender woman who wants to live as a woman, what we called back then a transsexual. Right. Which kind of has a negative connotation these days. But like I said, I'm using the terminology that was around when I... Sure. Allison was actually just a cross-dresser who was considering the surgery. Her storyline would have been, do I need the surgery? Do I want to live in that role? Do I want to be able to have the ability to switch around? Do I want to live as a woman and not have the surgery? Which was a valid concern among a lot of the people that I was with at the time, because I was in a support group that was mostly for cross-dressers. It did actually, cater to transgender people, and I'm happy to say that I was the one transgender person in that group. And then the Victoria, who was the drag queen who's the drag queen in the story, was a drag queen then, which I considered part of the spectrum at the time. And Heidi was, and again, this is terminology of at the time, was what I considered a transvestite, someone who got off on cross-dressing. Oh, okay. Which changed into the dominatrix thing because I wanted to keep that kind of sexuality to it while not actually making sexuality to it. I wanted to, because the idea of a dominatrix who pays for a job just makes me think is hilarious.
Well, that would make her so much better at it, right?
Yeah.
That isn't my experience, most dominatrix. Once it becomes your job.
It's like everything else, right? Once you're paid for it, it's no fun anymore.
So the one thing that really, really changed, and it had to do with a friend of mine, was Carrie's sister, Becky. Mm-hmm. In the original story, Becky was basically just kind of like our control group. She was just Carrie's sister. Right. No gender variance, no gender problems. Was very, very happy that her brother, or sister at the time, or coming at the time, was very happy with her decision. Mm-hmm. Instead, now in the new version, she embodies an attitude that I had to deal with throughout most of the 90s during my transition, which is you can't buy your way into the sisterhood. And that is a really rough thing.
That is complete bullshit.
Yeah, it is.
Now, just to clarify, what do you mean by the sisterhood?
There's a mindset out there of when you're born a man, you're stuck as a man. No
right. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, you can't buy your way into the sisterhood with surgery.
The TERF attitude, the current right-wing conservative attitude. Exactly. Right.
Exactly. Right. The TERF is the quote-unquote new term for it. It's not one that I used back then.
Right.
But she's not as violent as the TERFs because they're not violent. That's the wrong word.
Yeah, and she's not really a radical feminist.
Yeah, she's
right. But embodiment representing that attitude though.
Yeah, she has the attitude, and that was an attitude that was one that I dealt with, was someone who was just like, I don't hate you or anything, but you can't have what I have.
Right,
because you just didn't get it. I'm sorry, you're just not getting it. Huh. And so her character changed a lot.
Right.
A whole lot over the years. Along with Heidi actually changed a lot because I wanted to make her more of a comic character. Allison is a huge change.
Well, and Allison's a pretty controversial character for you too, because the idea of trans regret is something that's used by political opponents and social opponents, and also I know that you've gotten an accusation of being a bit gatekeepery too with the stories.
That's very true. One of the things about Allison, it's kind of a personal story. When I came out in about 97. I'd been online for a very long time as a woman. And when I came out in 97 in meat space instead of internet space, I came out to my friends on the internet and said, hey, the woman you've been talking to since 1997 is trans. And I was really surprised. They all took it incredibly well. There was, except for one person, there was no problem at all with it.
There's always one.
Yeah, there's always one. There's always going to be. Right. And one of my friends, who coincidentally was named Allison, was like, I think I'm trans too. And it's hard to say this because she's very, very diplomatic about it. She's very, very cool with it. But I feel that I became her cheerleader, and I gave her a gun with the bullets in it for her to shoot herself. I mean, not literally.
Right.
That's not a good analogy because people actually do that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Well, meaning that, you enabled her going down a path that maybe wasn't the correct one for her then.
Right. I enabled her to go down that path that was not what she should have done. She took what I was doing, applied it to herself, and ran with it.
Right.
And we're talking, I believe it was 9 months to a year from the time that she said I'm trans to the time that she got her surgery.
Wow.
I'm not 100% sure on that, and I'm sure Allison will correct me if she hears this.
Sure.
And then after she got the surgery, she really regretted it. She was just like, "What have I done?"
Wow.
And I felt personally responsible for that. I felt being the cheerleader for that really, really was. It to this day, it's hard to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I feel responsible for that, and I felt that this is a story that needs to be told because most of the transgender comics out there, or at the time, were slice of life comics where in the end, everything, there were hardships and everything, but in the end, there were happy endings.
Right. Generally a positive message to it all. And it gets better kind of message.
Right. The person who's undergoing the transition in the end will be happy.
Right.
And I desperately wanted people to, for the same reason that we're doing the My Vanity Fair cover, that's not always the story.
Right.
And I felt I needed to get that story out there because it affected someone I knew personally.
Yeah. And it's not, and again, it's not to give ammo to an opposition, but rather to, people do need to understand there's a range here. It's not one or the other. Just like there's no gender binary. There's not necessarily a monolithic idea of what it is that being trans is.
Right. And one of the ideas that I'm rolling around in my head, the Closetspace story is actually finished in my head. I had the beginning, middle, and end. Mm-hmm. There are nuances that I'm putting into that. And I'm currently writing an arc where Allison is finally undergoing some sort of therapy. And we're going to find out shortly why she felt that the surgery was right. And we're also going to find out why it's completely wrong for her. Mm. I don't really want to spoil it too much.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, knowing my
you've got fans here, Jen. We don't want it spoiled for us.
Yeah, that's true. And on top of that, knowing my release schedule, I could release it now, or talk about it here now, and not release it for a year and a half.
Right.
But it's a valid issue with Allison, and one that we're going to learn that it was a trap that she fell into, and once the trap was sprung, she realized it was wrong. Which has no reflection on my friend's transition state. This is comic book Allison's transition.
Right. But there's a parallel there. There was an inspiration. There's a reason that you felt that story was important to tell.
Yeah. And I get a lot of crap for it sometimes because people are kind of down on the fact that I have a transgender person who is not happy with her transition.
Right.
And I have to say, it happens.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen super often, but it's important to point out that transitioning won't fix all your problems, and there should be a good amount of introspection anytime you do something that's a massive life change.
Yeah.
Right.
The tagline that I tend to use for that is you have to really think about this because if you're not trans when you start this, you will be trans at the end of it.
Right. So also before we wrap up, I want to ask you a little bit about A Wish for Wings too, because this is story about angels, but there's a lot of next level stuff going on with it. There's an entire universe really that's been imagined, because it's not something you talk about angels, but you're not strictly using the angels in the Judeo-Christian sense.
Absolutely not. Basically, what A Wish for Wings is, it's my attempt at writing just a good drama story. I really want to just do a good story out there. And in fact, I think A Wish for Wings is actually a better story than Closetspace, but it doesn't have the reach that Closetspace does, simply because, I have a transgender audience who's not so keen on the angel thing. I have a personal belief that it sounds weird on the cusp of it, but it's all religions are right, but not always.
Sure.
And the angel structure and the heaven structure that I have in A Wish for Wings is a little bit of that. There's little pieces of Judeo-Christian in there. There's little pieces of Islam. There's little pieces of Buddhism. There's actually quite a few pieces of Mormonism in there. And the idea was to build this heaven structure that most religions are going to see just a little piece of, because I want them to see that, they didn't ignore me.
Right.
And that's how I built that.
Right.
Now, to be fair, the story that I'm telling is completely fictional and doesn't represent any religion that I know of, but at the same time tries to take a little bit from all the ones that I know of to make it work. The story is about a girl who wants to be an angel. She's convinced she's an angel because her mom calls her an angel when she's a very, very little kid, but actually gets to meet one at that formative stage. And it changes who she is. She wants to be that kind of angel character, the one that gives to humanity, the one that wants to help people. And eventually she kind of goes the monk route for a while there, where she just walks away from everything to make her life and everyone else's life better. That is pretty much the first half of the story, which is already done.
Right.
The problem is that when she finally becomes an angel, she realizes that heaven is nothing like she thought it was going to be. It's not the angels being these wonderful, giving, caring people, but they're in the middle of a really life and death kind of war going on. And they're not always good people that are running these things. Sure, the shadows who are the bad guys in this are bad guys.
Yeah.
But the angels have gotten kind of dark and not very...
There's politics.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, we need to eradicate the shadows, whether that's in the best interest of everything or not.
Right.
So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people trying to steer the ship right. There's a lot of people who think that the ship can't be steered right, but want it to be. And there's people who are like, we're going down the right path and we're just going to keep going down this path. So that's where that story is blossomed up for me. And in all honesty, it's actually two stories. And I finished the first half of the story, which was the story about Andrea. She was alive. And we're in the second half of the story, which was actually a sequel that I designed, or I thought about. That was the actual portion of what if she became an angel and it wasn't good.
Right. And you got to get on that update schedule, because she's been lying in that cave, unconscious and bleeding for 6 months now. So gotta get on that.
I got a piece of paper where she sits up.
Oh, spoilers.
Yeah, guess what? She sits up. She lives. Oh, we don't know about that yet. She sits up.
Well, I look forward to seeing what happens with both those. Jenn, Crystal, thank you so much for coming on the program. Wish you all the best with the Vanity Fair cover. We'll see where that goes, and congratulations, guys.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
As always, if you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard here tonight, or suggestions for future shows, I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to drop me an email at niceguy9418@usa.com. Good night, and thank you for listening to In My Humble Opinion on Rainbow Radio.